go ahead and share my screen now.
Great, thank you so much for sharing that. Definitely a wonderful way to set this artist talk off. I'm Francine, I'm the manager here, and this is Alma. She's the director of the gallery, and we are both so grateful and happy that you guys took the time to both do the show and do this artist talk. We are so excited. I'm just really briefly going to read the exhibition statement for the show for everyone in the video who hasn't had a chance to come in and see it, just to set things off. So the artworks presented in this exhibition begin with a series of conversations among Farah Salem, Hannah Bates, and Zulekya Alejandro during their time at the Chicago-based artist residency Acre in rural Southwest Wisconsin. Informed by their historic, cultural, and professional backgrounds, the artists work through an ecofeminist lens. Earth and Body explores the intersections between non-human agents, craft processes, and formations of the natural world. The exhibition includes both individual projects from the three artists and a video installation. There is a complex web weaving between the artist's work that resembles the mycorrhizal network underneath the forest floor. Farah Salem's distorted woven landscapes, Hannah Bates' casted bodily tree forms, Zulekya Alejandro's accumulation of ceramic microorganisms, and the artist's eco-dreamy collaborative video exists in a space like a grouping of trees in the forest. The work resonates with one another and nourishes each other in a non-hierarchical way. Earth and Body utilizes this organic structure as a means to discover a more sustainable and compassionate way of moving through the world. So that's the artist statement, or the exhibition statement. And a little bit about each of the artists, which they will tell you more about as they go through the exhibition. Farah Salem is an artist and art therapist based in Chicago. Farah holds an MA in art therapy and counseling from the School of the Art Institute, and her studio and art therapy practices are bridged by social activism and research. Her studio practice is rooted in photography and expands into video, performance, fibers, and installation. Hannah Bates is an interdisciplinary artist working in sculpture, glass, and installation. Her work investigates the formal relationships between body and landscape in order to reveal the agency of matter within the Anthropocene. And Zulekya Alejandro is an artist, an educator, art educator. She holds a degree in fine arts from the University of Puerto Rico, a master's degree in art education and in arts education of the University of Granada, and a doctoral student in the University of Granada. That's just a brief overview. Thank you once again, and go ahead.
Cool. Farah and Zule, I kind of want to say something about the video real quick.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, can you go back to that slide?
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, so Farah, Zule, and I met at Acre in summer of 2019. where we took most of this footage. Farah had then returned last summer and also took more video, but it just very organically came about shooting this video. And then also Farah and I were taking lots of sound recordings. So the sound you hear is all recorded at Acre, and it includes, there's an abandoned silo at the residency. And so one night, a big group of us were just in the silo screaming and singing because the silo has really interesting acoustics. So that was just a recording from that night, and it just has a very primal sound to it. And yeah, if you guys are able to go to the gallery and see the whole thing, it's definitely worth it. All right. So yeah, I'm Hannah Bates. I'm based in Cleveland, Ohio, which is where I'm from. I'm from kind of a suburb outside of Cleveland. And the work I have in the show is titled Digest. And there's Digest 1 and Digest 2. You can go to the next slide, Farah. So it's a collection of found, fabricated, and foraged objects out of a variety of materials. So there's casted glass, cast plaster, cement, wax, stone, forged mushrooms, pieces of bark, just a large slew of objects. And they all kind of have to do with my physical or bodily relationship to an environment. And there's a lot of hands. I do a lot of castings of hands because as a craft person, I'm very connected to my sense of touch. And it's how I also directly relate to my physical environment or landscape. When I was at Acre, I started getting into foraging for mushrooms and other edible plants and kind of continued that and moved back to Ohio and just started wandering around in the woods and learning about the landscape through these strange fruiting bodies I was finding and figuring out what I could eat. And it became kind of like this beautiful way of becoming a part of the landscape through foraging these mushrooms, cooking them and consuming them, which is something that I experience when I'm alone in the woods, is just kind of the dissolution of where my body ends and the world begins. And I started formally representing it in castings. So I created a casting at Acre in plaster that's on one side a mushroom, and on the other side, yeah, that piece. One of the detail shots, sorry. It's a glass casted piece.
Oh.
This piece on the left. So on the underside where there would be mushroom pores, or the pores of the mushroom, it's a casting of my hand. So that's kind of a formal representation of this convergence of body and landscape. But then when I started foraging, it became like an actual real thing where I felt like I was, digesting the land. So the title of the piece is Digest, is both digest, like a library or collection, but also digest, like the digestive system. And there's a casting also of a ginger root, which I always have had a fascination with ginger, which aids in digestion, but also is a rhizome, the biological structure of a rhizome, which was referenced in our statement, and how rhizomes are non-hierarchical, and also kind of reference the forms of the mycorrhizal network of mushrooms or fungi underneath the forest floor, which acts as this web between trees and living organisms, and kind of orchestrates everything and shares nutrients, and it's a really beautiful thing. So yeah, I really want people when they view the work to have this element of discovery and curiosity, similar to the curiosity I experience when I'm out in the woods and just getting lost and being amazed and becoming a little kid again and just being very enchanted by what you find and really resonating with objects. And also there's a lot of ambiguity of forms. Is this a body part? Is this some, a mushroom? Is this a piece of bark? And then there's also a lot of ambiguity in the materials. So I always embrace that in my work because I think it just adds an element of curiosity and yeah, enchantment. So in my recent work too, I've kind of just been curating a collection of objects that I've made, small objects that I found and made. And this is the first time I've created a more formal structure for presenting them. And I also have always been interested in kind of this duality in kind of human consciousness or the way our brain works, of this left-right brain, more logical ways of thinking and structured ways of thinking, and more fluid, maybe a more emotional ways of thinking. So when I work with wood, it's you have to be kind of precise in the way that you work. And at least, yeah, the way that I constructed these shelves, it's a more rigid material in ways, and you have to measure. And compared to when I work with glass or plaster, they're very fluid materials, and they're much more flexible in ways. So there's kind of this formal duality of the structure of these shelves compared to the organic forms that the shelves contain, that I think connects with this interest I have in mental kind of dualities. Yeah, glass is kind of the material I know most about. I teach an intro to glassworking class at the university level, and it's this material of transformation. It really can look like anything, and can have all these different properties. It can be opaque, transparent, all these different colors, textures. And I've always really resonated with that element of transformation that also happens in a landscape through the seasons, and our bodies undergo lots of transformation. So there's kind of an element of transformation and time in the work. So with casting glass, it's kind of a long process. You have to have your initial object, and then take a rubber mold of that object, and then a wax positive from the rubber mold. And then you have to take a plaster silica negative from the wax, and then steam out the wax and cast the glass positive into the plaster silica mold, and then break the plaster silica mold, and then clean up your casting. So it's this really process of transformation and time. And in the work, there's kind of all parts of that process. So there is the plaster, just plaster castings. There's the wax positives. And so there's different elements of time in these objects. And even with the found objects, there's elements of time and weathering. And like in that found piece of wood, you can kind of see the growth rings and just the history and materials has always been really fascinating to me. Yeah, so I think I'm gonna kind of continue working in this mode of just collecting objects and make. And then when it comes time to present, curate and arrange and see how objects speak to each other and what sort of webs, they weave together, kind of like in this entire exhibition, like the webs that start to weave between each other's works, I think is really fascinating and beautiful, and the mystery and the curiosity in those. And like I said, the sense of discovery. So yeah, I think I'm going to kind of keep working on this path, and also, I think this work and future works kind of resonate with my own life, and just cultivating like a holistic sense of well-being, and really thinking about how your environment affects your health, and what you consume becomes a part of you. Just thinking about like it being winter in Cleveland, Ohio, and how it makes the tips of my fingers crack, and it's my skin becomes pale, and it becomes a very introspective time. So how all these things affect mood and your physical body. And so, yeah, I think that's about all I gotta say on that. Thank you guys for listening. And I think I'll pass it off to Farah. Yeah, my lovely lady Farah.
Right. So yeah, there's a couple of themes that Hannah touched on that also show in my work, but also throughout the 3 different projects that I present in this exhibition. There's themes of visibility, invisibility, access, agency, power, authority, also structure building and the flexibility of that. So I'll start off with this project, Erode Recompose. I was really interested in the material of Polaroids, and how, Polaroids essentially fade over time. However, in these specific Polaroids that I use in this project, they've kind of developed, if you can see, some undeveloped patches while the image was trying to create itself or birth itself. And it makes me think a lot about how memory formulates, and what happens to a memory when it is interrupted, and has these undeveloped patches or holes in memory because of a traumatic interruption. So as an art therapist working in clinical settings with heavy exposure to clients who've experienced trauma, me personally going through trauma, I know this very well, of how memory seems to form, fade, but at the same time have holes in it, and is interrupted in some way. So yeah, that is, the thing that intrigues me about Polaroids. And over the years, I've collected these Polaroids that every time I've tried to shoot them, there's like an issue with the film, and I'll have these undeveloped patches, or these images are starting to fade because something is off with the chemical. But also knowing that it's eventually going to fade completely if I don't engage in a specific like preservation process. So I was really interested in how they kind of, like, even with these interruptions that they have in them, how they create some kind of mental landscape or internal psyche landscape. And emerging from that, I started, I wouldn't say necessarily veiling, but more like integrating fabric patterns that can further build on that landscape. And it makes me think of this process of eroding or fading memory, merging or becoming recomposed to create new formulations. So kind of creating a new mind landscape in this process, which again touches on the idea of agency, and how we can access that within ourselves and create that for ourselves. So there are a set of 3, and I kind of just like set out these different collected Polaroids over time. In this next piece, it's basically a aerial view photograph of a desert landscape that I was flying over. I was quite interested in seeing this vast space from above. And I just had this like innate feeling that I want to be a part of that. That looks like something that is a part of me, or you know, it just felt like an extension of skin or body landscape in its own way. So after photographing it, that kind of stayed with me. And in my work, a lot of the times I think of fabric as an extension of our bodies. Just coming from the cultural background for me in Kuwait, where sometimes veiling garments or clothing, like adorning your body, just kind of becomes an extension of your identity. So I was interested in the weaving process and taking that image initially of a landscape and thinking of it as something that is an extension of my body. So there's also this interest in looms being the thing that inspired digital information or computers or pixels to eventually be created, right? So I kind of extracted this pixel or visual information from that digital image and encoded it into the loom. And at that same time, I bring my body into the landscape as I weave it, as I create it. So again, there's that sense of agency and authority in creating my own structure. I think it's quite as simple as the idea is of creating structure, but I think it's a privilege when women get to finally participate and build or create their own structures, because how often do we get to do that as women? Another interest for me was that it's a lace weaving process. So it has this transparency. And, you know, this idea of transparency makes me think about like flexibility and again, like thinning the veil or the distance between in the way that I eventually perform with this weaving, kind of thinning the veil and merging the body with this landscape that I initially felt like it was an extension of myself. What else do I want to say about this piece? Yeah, I think just the performing images further explore this ongoing theme of the relationship between body and landscape in connection to visibility and invisibility, which is highlighted by it's kind of like a combo of both previous works. So I feel like it was a buildup. I'm initially conceptualizing this idea pre-pandemic, but I didn't really get into it until the anxiety of the pandemic really hit me. And this was a way to soothe myself in some sense. So I was, in this work, I am again both bringing the mind landscape with the physical landscape and they all intersect into this natural landscape or desert landscape that I use as a metaphor for both mind and body. The photographs or the inspiration behind this project came about when I was hiking through a Antelope Canyon. It's in Navajo Nation, northern Arizona. And what interested me in this canyon, it's created or it's carved intimately or through this intimate process by flash floods or water. So the rock formations there are quite smooth, very physical, as in like very, very similar to the physical body. I think walking through it, I had this moment of, is this skin or is this fabric? This cannot be rock. It was so smooth and my mind couldn't put together what I was perceiving in that moment until I touched it or felt into it. So again, bringing the body into the landscape. And there's that disconnect sometimes that happens to memory or because we process through our memory. So I couldn't tell the difference of what I was being exposed to. eventually I was interested in screen printing these images, further playing on that idea of distortion. So I'm going to see if I have a zoom in. Yeah. So you can see behind there's this like golden screen prints. These are screen prints of the photographs I've taken at that canyon. So further playing on that idea of distortion. However, I again built on the idea of creating my own structures. So building these hand looms to stretch on it the thread so that I can weave, and the weavings are weavings from my memory of how I perceived or experienced being in this canyon, and again thinking of that process of bringing the body into the landscape. There's something so intimate about the process of these rock formations, but also the process of making the work. And I think it meets in this idea of lace weaving as a way to thin the veil or thin the boundary between our bodies and the natural environment. I really feel like there is this big disconnect, and it's highlighted throughout my work and our works collectively in this exhibition, the relationship between our bodies and natural landscapes and environments, especially as women. So again, the theme of agency comes up of like weaving or creating structures as an attempt to reconnect to where there has been disconnection. That's all I have to say. I'm gonna pass it on to Zule. Are you ready?
Yes.
Cool.
Hi, everyone. I wanted to thank Alma and Francine for putting this together and having us in their gallery. It's been really exciting because we spent like a year talking about this, and it finally like materialized, and it was so awesome and special. And thanks everybody that is here giving us their time and listening to us. That's awesome. Really appreciate that. Well, for my part and my personal creative process and like the ways we intersect between each other, I feel like it's very important, as you can see and hear, the theme about the body. I'm sorry, if you hear roosters, my building is like invaded by roosters and chickens. They're living between us, so it's part of it. Yeah, the body is really important. Starting like a starting point, like a reference, like a place, like a field of like a battlefield, a political field, sensual field. And I feel like my way of creating, especially, it relates to matter in that way, as me being matter and matter interacting with me while I create and we create together. I feel like that agency that we've been talking about translates not only to people, other bodies, but also to objects and matter, like Hannah was talking also about how objects relate between each other and how they relate with us and how we sort of change in each interaction with them. I feel like, for example, with ceramics, which is a very important medium in my work, there's that relationship between the matter and my body and my hands, feeling the matter and like sort of listening to it and creating with it, and not trying to impose a form to matter, but like thinking about what is not a form, what is amorphous, what is like sort of a process and not an ending, like symbol that you can identify, but this like abstract shape that could be anything, that could be a body, or it could be a cell, or it could be some sort of like microorganism. And it feels like it's a kind of like primal thing that I can connect with. And I feel like also the process of creating with clay sort of literally materialize my internal thoughts and my internal thinking while I'm creating. And there's like this correlation between what is happening outside and what is happening inside my brain. Yeah, this work that you see here are like an example of that, how I can work with a medium and create something that it doesn't have a specific shape or a specific ending that I would like to accomplish, but it's just a result of me interacting with this ceramic and clay. And I feel like that this organic shape just comes out by itself somehow. I mean, not entirely, of course, there's an influence of me, but also I feel like I give the space for the matter to express itself through like its qualities and like how it just adapts to whatever I'm doing. And that's something that is very important within my work, that I try to explore this idea of not working, of not giving a specific shape, just working with the informal shape that is a sort of like process or continuing or deformation, but it's never an ending thing. And how that relates to what is being understood as a female body in like Western tradition, how females are this like attached to emotional bodies that are always in correlation to phenomena and not with theory or thinking, but it's like in constant transformation. And how that can be a way to just avoid having to have like a specific shape to like insert yourself in a specific system, sort of fighting a little bit that idea that we need to fit into something or be like a finished product or see our bodies in specific ways to accommodate other people or make other people feel better about themselves or whatever. I feel like that idea of relating the body and my body of work as that, as be giving it space to be whatever it is and not trying to fit or conform with any how do you say, like thing that is being imposed, but like giving space to that thing to just like evolve. And that's something that maybe brings me back to my relationship with matter. I feel like in a metaphysical way, matter and the body, it's always in a constant recreation of itself. So every time you interact with it, you are changing, and it's like it's having an effect on you, and you're having an effect on that thing, that object. And that's where the agency comes from. It's actually that how it has the power to reconform your way of thinking or your way of learning or your way of creating. And in my paintings that you see here are also a result of that way of thinking, of that just free exploration with the materials and whatever I have accessible, this is the result of that reflection. I feel like it's just thinking about a body in a conformal, non-conformity way, and thinking about all the things that actually influence your body and you don't realize how all social economical or even like microorganisms affect your body, and you are not, if you're not aware of that, you're just there. This is sort of like going over your head, and there is a lot of things and strings that are attached to your body, and how we little by little try to liberate ourselves from all of those influences and try to see our body as an internal, like see our body from an internal perspective and not vice versa, not seeing our body from an external perspective. And that also, like Hannah was talking about, the duality, I feel like that's something very important in my work as well, that not trying to break that binary thinking of art and craft, why something is art, why something is craft, and where does those conceptions come from, as well as female, male, all of this binary thinking, as well as living beings and non-living beings, objects, how we can actually reflect about all of this binary thinking, and how we can liberate ourselves from that and think from a more universal or like singular place, not like see that separation, like also Farah was talking about the landscape of the desert and how it relates to the body and how it looks like a body, and how we feel we are sort of part of that. We are part of that, but there is like this disconnected thinking that makes us feel like that's something like dangerous and far away from us, but actually erasing those boundaries is like also part of what influenced me in making this kind of work. This piece over here, I feel like I'm talking about that internal, external landscapes and how they are completely related. This piece is called the individual condition, and I feel like that being caught in a half and opened and like kind of seeing that there's like an emptiness, like an empty space, like something that if we don't share with other people is just very how do you say, like individual and isolated, and it doesn't take any meaning because you don't have the other to help you give more meaning to that inner empty space. Yeah, I feel like it's kind of like what I wanted to say. I don't remember if I talk about everything, but I guess we can go ahead and like let people interact if they have any questions.
We had a question, if that's okay. So obviously you guys have a fantastic synergy and all your works really speak to each other thematically, really in a beautiful way. So I'm interested in knowing what attracted you all to work together in the first place.
I have as they were talking, it like reminded me what brought us together, or what our first kind of interactions or like when I felt like, wow, I really connect with you. Like I remember with Zule, we just started talking about the agency of matter. I think she had looked at my website, and then we just started talking about Donna Haraway and materialism, and immediately we were like, okay, we're thinking about very similar things. And Zule and I also talk a lot about kind of functional objects and ceramics and glass, making functional vessels, and kind of our relationship to our everyday mundane objects. So we kind of relate also on that kind of craft level. And Farah, when she was talking about the walls, the very smooth, like canyon walls, we went on this really long walk at Acre, and we're really talking about the very visceral, like sensuality of landscape, and really connecting with it as like this animated thing, like this animated body that you can have like kind of this, very sensual relationship with through touch and just through breathing and being outside. So yeah, I remember those two conversations with each of them very clearly.
Should I go? I think what really attracted me from both of Hannah and Farah is like they will speak to me in a very soft way. So I feel like, oh, this is definitely why, people that I want to connect with and talk about vulnerability and talk about how our body, how we relate to the landscape and the environment and how it actually changes us. While we were at Acre, how we were so internally influenced by the externalities of being in this beautiful landscape during the summer in Wisconsin. So, and also how they relate to craft and craft processes like weaving or glass making, or we have that all in common, that we really want to talk about the process and how the process is part of the final product. And yeah, that's all.
Yeah, for me, I like remember we were eating lunch and I had this conversation with Hannah about like experiencing traumatic events and memories, and how engaging in art making or using specific materials that require like pouring all of your focused energy into the process, and what that does to our bodies. And again, we had that long walk. We just kind of started playing. And around that same time, we were like recording sound together. I felt like we were like kids on a playground. And then I spent some time with Zule also, and I have this memory of her like working in the clay or the ceramic studio, and she's like, look at all the things your body can do in relation to this material. So I think I was just fascinated by the conversations I was having with the two of them about, just how our bodies engage to material, and how that material resembles or is an extension of the natural landscape. Just like Zule said, it was just felt very soft and vulnerable to have these conversations. There was no like, I'm an artist and I do this and that. It just didn't feel like so like fluffed up. It was so natural. And I think what drew me closer was that they were willing to just like let me film and perform. Like while they were performing in our video, they would just like let me do whatever I wanted to do in terms of like putting that film together. And that, yeah, it's just like all came together so naturally. That makes me feel like, okay, there's so many connected themes here that can send our strong message together.
Hi. Thank you so much for sharing your work and perspective. And I think your work together, I don't know, has really made me like rethink about like what ecofeminism is in art and how we've seen it in art. Like I'm thinking of like a lot of land artists and performance artists, like Anna Mendieta, for example. And I'm wondering if you kind of looked at sort of how like have you used like the 1970s like ecofeminism, for example, as like a reference in putting together this exhibition. And I'm also curious, like just seeing how, yeah, so like I guess asking like if there were any like inspirations or references that you all may have looked at. And I'm also curious if the three of you are thinking about any future collaborations together.
Okay, I can go. Well, yes. I mean, for me individually, I love Ana Mendieta's silhouettes. The work she made, like she just made a silhouette of a body in the landscape, and she had like a amazing series of different interventions. Um, but I feel like talking about this Donna Haraway and Rosi Braidotti and all this like matter agency and how do we relate to the landscape and the environment and being actually connected to your environment in a ethical way, and all of this is definitely there. I feel like what we've been reading also, like Anna Singh, is that how you pronounce that?
Yeah, the mushroom at the end of the world.
Yeah, so definitely there's a lot of that. I don't know if you guys want to add anything.
Yeah, I think I remember early on we were sharing readings, and I specifically remember sharing the EcoSex Manifesto, which is kind of silly, but also a beautiful idea of like being an ecosexual and having like a, you know, a desire for the earth and like viewing the earth as like a lover. And if you view it that way, then you want to like be kind to it, and like how that can lead to a really ecological way of being. That came to mind also. And also recently, Agnes Martin has like popped up back in my life. And when Zule was talking, just talking about ideas or things just kind of coming to you, or like working with materials and just allowing things to arise and not trying to get in the way of like what you make, you know. Yeah, that also, I don't know if we ever talked about her, but I just thought about her when Zule was talking.
I don't have anything to add.
Are the three of you going to work together again?
Oh,
Yeah,
you can answer that.
I think after, or like the night before the opening, we're like, we're having something else coming up, right? We're gonna try to make it happen.
We're hoping to, we all volunteered or filled out applications to volunteer at Acre again next summer. We hope to actually meet again at the landscape we originally met at. And I'm sure that place was just such a, was such a, just a perfect place for us to play as like little kids. And so I'm sure something will come of that if that happens.
I have something to add in regards to everything that I saw. First of all, I think that it's very powerful how, you know, three women got together to create this piece of work, each with your own identity, but creating this language. And three main things that it kind of, you know, came to my mind as I was hearing you and as I was looking into your work. The first one is agency. agency as a concept and as a word is something that doesn't even exist in Spanish, for example, the word agency, and there's not a specific translation to it. So then I started thinking how powerful it is, how language becomes so powerful in this piece, because you girls need to find a specific language, you all coming from different contexts, that can put you all, that can let you communicate what you want to communicate together. And I am an art teacher. I teach 5th and 6th grade children, and there's this thing that's called PYP, which is kind of like the philosophy that we use to teach. And the main concept that is used through the PYP, which is kind of like saying the IB program, is agency. And I thought that was so interesting because it's something that we are, constantly teaching. I am constantly teaching children to like find their voice, to use agency, to like, and to make whatever they want to make, to not have to use the same materials, to go, use whatever scale they want to use. Like that's the type of way in which I, teach agency. And then when Farah, was also referencing how it was like playing where you girls met, and when you girls were talking about and each other's art and how it connects, that it was kind of like playing, right? That it's kind of like just being, and then now using that concept agency as a concept for your work. And I think there's something very powerful there, that goes back to education, that goes back to the classroom space and what we are teaching to children. But you are connecting it to, by, as women, to create, to deconstruct everything that has already been built and trying to construct our own spaces here. That's kind of the battlefield, and I hope we win that war. But it makes me mad, to like think that we have to do this, that think that we have to deconstruct to build these spaces. But at the same time, it makes me very hopeful and happy to see that there's space to have these conversations, and that there's women that are working to change that. So thank you.
Thank you.
Wow, yeah, that was really beautiful. Yeah, I think like us all coming from such different backgrounds and immediately finding like some sort of spark or connection or similarities is, yeah, it's really powerful to then like connect through the language of materials and art and making, because I think we have just such different perspectives, but also like it's kind of, we tap into this collective consciousness or like these collective themes that unite us. And and I think the thing with agency and kind of being like a little kid again, and like I said, to me, it connects to like being enchanted and being engaged with your surroundings, and not just like shutting down and being apathetic and living with your eyes shut. Like it's like kids are just, they're aware and they're engaged and excited, and that's what I think we all hope to like all three of us, and hope to cultivate in our own lives and making.
There's a reading that I was doing a while back where it was about like play. There's a quote that stays with me, which says, "You cannot play on demand," which makes me think about the process of making, where we sometimes expect to make on demand. But I think the natural sense of agency is kind of like when Zule was talking about how letting these forms arise of their own. So allowing the material and the work to arise on its own. And I think that also connects to what Hannah was saying about maybe like tapping into a collective sense, which brought us all together. Perhaps there is some influence there from a collective trauma that the female body has experienced. It's like this chronic freeze mode almost. And so, the way to overcome this freeze mode, which is just trapped energy within the nervous system, is to find a way to access agency. And at least in my art therapy practice, the material serves as this tool to access your agency. So yeah, thanks Trini for that comment. It made me think about some stuff.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for your time and everyone who attended. Zulekya, Hannah, and Farah, we can't thank you enough. We really appreciate your perspective, and it's been such a wonderful time hearing more about your work.
Yes, and we're open today. So if anyone hasn't seen the exhibition, we're here from 1 to 6. Tomorrow, 1 to 5. Stop by.
Yes. Please.
Yes, thank you so all for listening and yeah, taking time. It's really appreciated. And thank you to Heaven Gallery for hosting.
Absolutely. This talk has been recorded and it will be on our website. So if anyone wants to watch it again or share it with friends or family, it'll be there. So thank you all for attending. I hope everyone has a beautiful rest of your day and hope to see everyone sometime soon.
Yay.
Bye.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Nice to see you all.
Yes.